The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 41. Plans and Schemes. Hermione fled the Slytherin dungeons to hide in the library's Goblin History section, the same narrow aisle where Theo had first found her with Draco. "I'll kiss you if you tell me." She settled on the floor with her back against the shelf, heedless of the tinny, screeching curses emanating from the gory books of goblins. The numbers in her arithmancy book swam before her eyes, and Theo's voice played on a continuous loop. "Nobody changes that much. His obsession with you. Dangerous. Possessive. Draco Malfoy will break your heart." Could hear the emotion in Theo's voice, the concern, but she also had bitterness and injured pride, a baffled anger that nothing he could say would get him what he wanted. And Hermione still believed her fond words. If she had been so unfortunate as to fall in love with him, Theodore Nott would have broken her heart. Not right away, not through cruelty or anger, or worst of all, indifference. No, Theo would have been all attention and courtesy, with a sure hand and an easy smile, and she would have dashed her heart to pieces on that cool shell. As for Draco, well, she had already drawn up a loop chart on the subject, with a probable future timeline, see Appendix A. He could break her heart. He could also wreck her reputation. He could be masterminding an elaborate setup to gratify his evil lusts and schemes. The last option had Hermione snorting aloud. Come on! If Draco's pursuit of her was part of a diabolical plan, it was the most badly conceived and ineptly executed plan since Voldemort's Horcrux roadshow. Draco had undermined himself at practically every turn, frequently denying himself, in Hermione's opinion, the luxury of rational thought. The man was a bit of a mess, and this only strengthened Hermione's belief that Draco really had changed. Change was messy and painful and unpredictable. He was nowhere near redeemed, too many demons, but to her way of thinking he had earned the opportunity to try, despite what Theo or Ron or that bloody Lupin said. Hermione stretched out her legs on the stone floor and transfigured a handkerchief into a thick green blanket. It was freezing in the library, but one couldn't risk a warming charm around so many books. She pushed Slytherins out of her mind and focused on her arithmancy text. The formulas for calculating the epicycles and difference for mass were fascinating, and Hermione had been exploring their implications. Ptolemy's geocentric model might be clunky and ridiculous, but the formulas had great magical power. Hermione had even drawn up a similar system using Jupiter as the center in her spare time, and was soon covering the floor of the Goblin History section with complicated number charts. It calmed her nerves. A fit of inspiration had her wadding up bits of parchment and floating them in the air to mimic the sun's and planets' movements around Jupiter. In this case, Jupiter was an inkpot she'd painted orange and suspended in mid-air. It would be a great accompaniment to her next arithmancy presentation. What if Ptolemy was an alien? The success of her floating model so energized Hermione that she decided to go down to dinner, striding into the great hall with her arms full of arithmancy scrolls. Draco cast her a quick, concerned look from his seat beside Blaise, and she gave him a tiny nod. Theo was on the other side of the table, flanked by his former potion partners, who tried to tempt him with fruits and candies, among other things. Theo appeared more tempted by his goblet, which by his flushed cheeks Hermione guessed didn't hold pumpkin juice. She turned quickly away, dumping her scrolls on the Gryffindor table and sitting with her back to the Slytherins. But any hope of a quiet meal were quickly dashed. Many Newt-level courses had exams that week, and most of the table was in full panic mode. It was times like these she wished she'd been sorted into Ravenclaw, then she wouldn't have to deal with stupid questions about material presented weeks ago. "Read the book," she said for the umpteenth time, tearing off a bit of bread and moping up some stew gravy. "It will tell you exactly how to counteract excessive stirring in the fiducia potion, Romilda." "Can you explain the tomato circles again?" Seamus asked. "Ptolemaic circles," Hermione said through gritted teeth. "Look at that," Dean Thomas said. "I need to learn those bloody non-verbal spells. Hermione, can you?" Hermione sighed. "Dean, you have to practice." He broke off another chunk of bread, but dropped it into her stew uneaten. He would take her scrolls back to her dormitory, where she could draw her circles in peace. Perhaps McGonagall would approve a transfer to Ravenclaw in the name of interhouse unity. Hermione overslept Tuesday morning after staying up too late with her Jupiter formulas. Theo's pain had been obvious at dinner, no matter how much he tried to hide it, and Hermione was feeling a bit wretched again. She arrived at Ancient Runes, tired and hungry, to find Draco standing outside the classroom. "You weren't at breakfast," he said with a frown. "I'm fine." She took a spot against the opposite wall, feeling oddly shy. "You don't look fine," he said, stepping closer. "And Theo still looks furious. I'm guessing your talk went poorly." "Rather," Draco smirked. "You should have practiced with me." Hermione glowered back. "Not funny. Take your gloating somewhere else." He looked slightly chastened, and Hermione sighed. Draco wasn't trying to be annoying. He was just being him. Her shoulders drooped. "I'm sorry. I didn't sleep well." She expected him to take her hand, perhaps even try to kiss her out of her mood, but Draco remained where he was, arms at her side. "I'm glad you're no longer with Theo, but I don't like to see you unhappy," he confessed. "I did like him, you know." "He liked you too," Draco said. "It wasn't all He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "I know very well that Theo was using me," she said coldly. A short silence fell. Then Draco spoke. "Hermione, whatever Theo said, don't take it to heart. He's angry and—" "It's worse than that. Theo feels sorry for me." Hermione's voice was bitter. "Apparently I'm the victim of a Death Eater's sick obsession and too stupid to know it." Draco's body stiffened. "How dare!" he growled. "Don't take it to heart," Hermione parroted. Draco glared. Hermione rubbed her temples. Lack of breakfast had given her a slight headache. "Look, Theo has every right to speak his mind," she said. "You've tutored him like dragon shit for weeks for the terrible sin of dating me and treating me well. Why would he think any differently?" "Splendid," Draco said. "Now you're defending him. Who's next? I know, let's take you to Azkaban and you can defend my father for a while." "That's not a bad idea," Hermione said. "I don't think they're doing enough to protect prisoners from the magical virus." Draco scowled. Hermione gave him her best innocent look, and he dropped the scowl, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. "Mean?" he said. "I am," Hermione agreed. Then she sighed. "Theo will be fine. I likely hurt his pride more than anything else." That brought out a full grin. "A little humility will do him good." "That's a bit rich coming from you, Draco." He looked at her sternly. "I have taken numerous hits to my pride for your sake." "I know," she said, reaching out to take his hand. His warm skin sent a tremor through her. He leaned closer. "How grateful, Can I expect some reward for my sufferings?" "Sufferings, indeed," she said. "You'd think I'd sent you out to sleep in the rain." "In some cases, the rain would have been preferable. Yet here I am, still at your service." Draco raised her hand and kissed it, grey eyes on hers, and her heart thudded as she felt the brush of his lips on her skin, and perhaps the slightest touch of tongue. A tiny taste. The brisk click of footsteps broke them apart. It was Pansy mincing toward them in short-heeled boots that definitely pushed Hogwarts' dress code. "Well, isn't this sweet?" Pansy said with a sniff. She tucked a thick red ribbon scroll out of her tiny black purse. "Here, your charms note," she said, handing the scroll to Hermione. Hermione was impressed to see that Pansy had wrapped her toy broom research in actual charms note that resembled her own handwriting. Flirting with Slytherins did have its advantages. "Thank you, Parkinson," she said coolly. "Don't expect me to bail you out next time." Pansy glared but said nothing, just stalked off as best as she could in those boots. She was going to break an ankle on the castle floors one day. Draco looked at Hermione with mounting horror. "You two are scheming together. Whatever it is, please warn me beforehand so I can hide." "Nonsense," she said airily. She tucked Pansy's scroll into her bag as McGonagall and the rest of the class entered the corridor. "I'm just a kind and forgiving person." Potions class was cancelled that morning. Thank Merlin, as somebody, or somebody's likely little Hufflepuff buddies, had sealed the dungeon door shut with Rhapsody. Renegade's bottles of the stuff were spreading through the castle. Justin Finch Fletchley had been stuck to his bench at breakfast. Rhapsody even worked on ghosts, which no one could have predicted, and the Bloody Baron was found hanging upside down in the entrance hall, bellowing curses. "How did someone even get the potion up there?" people whispered. Slughorn had posted a note about the postponement that clearly stated, "Do not touch the door," for heading off to his private office to brew more unravelly. But a few students were stuck anyway, including poor Neville. "Somebody shoved me," he told Hermione, pulling fruitlessly at his strapped elbow. "Can you check on Wendy for me before lunch? Just give her a few drops of ink if she looks droopy." Hermione pursed her lips. "On one condition. Do you know where I can find some virgin earth?" "Virgin earth?" Neville's eyes widened. "You'll have to dig for it, by moonlight, with a silver shovel." "Can you help me?" Hermione asked. Neville looked around and lowered his voice. "Is this part of whatever you're doing with Pansy? Because I don't believe for a second that you two are studying charms." Hermione shrugged and Neville sighed. "All right. Meet me at the greenhouse 4 after dinner. There's an early half-moon tonight." Many magical plants reacted to moonlight, so Neville regularly tracked the moon's movement. "Do you have a silver shovel?" Hermione asked. He looked uncomfortable. "I do, actually. The ministry presented it to me in honor of my, deeds." Hermione beamed. "Lovely!" "Whatever you two are doing, I don't want to be anywhere near it," Neville warned. She laughed and patted his arm, keeping her hand well away from the door. "You sound just like Draco." The day's data class featured an absolute travesty of an exam. One section required students to sketch their favorite flowers. Hermione drew a winkweed from memory and labeled it, but at least it was quiet. Draco behaved himself, and Theo ignored her completely. Hermione spent the entire class fretting, but not about either wizard. Flower drawings were not proper preparation for nudes. Perhaps she should have developed her own data exam and pass it around, just to ensure the class properly understood nude-level material. Hermione was mentally outlining appropriate exam questions when a squeaky mouse popped out from behind a statue.
"Miss Granger."
It was a little Slytherin girl's.
"You seem quite easily startled,"
the girl said as Hermione fought to catch her breath.
"Are you sure you're a war heroine?"
"Can I help you?" Hermione asked, trying not to glare.
"Oh, no," the girl said. "My grades are quite good, and you seem a bit flustered in all other aspects of your life. I'm trying to get a boy to notice me, but you don't seem like the best role model there either."
Hermione couldn't help but grin. "What's your name?"
"Leela Durant,"
the dark-haired girl said.
"Still, you must have something going on if Mr. Malfoy is willing to tolerate your grumpy ways. Percival says it's your breasts."
"That little monster," Hermione muttered.
"I agree. The monster bit, I mean."
Lala said. He held out the scroll.
"I'm supposed to deliver this to you from Mr. Hagrid."
"Were you all in this pumpkin patch again?" Lila looked offended.
"I have care of magical creatures on Tuesday."
Hermione flattened the parchment and read it quickly. The baby hydras had arrived in London, and Hagrid was worried about their condition. Hermione was more concerned about the magical custom official's condition. "Are you going to rescue them?" Lila asked. Hermione frowned. "You shouldn't read other people's notes."
"It wasn't sealed,"
the little Slytherin said.
"Are you going to go? Professor Hagrid says hydras are really quite delicate."
Hermione snorted. "He also says dragons are misunderstood and hippogriffs are harmless." She reread the note. Hagrid appeared to be quite distressed. The parchment had a few tear stains like the note he'd sent about Buckbeak so long ago. She sighed. "I suppose I'll have to go. My name is on the paperwork." Lala trailed her back to Hagrid's hut, where the half-giant was pathetically grateful when Hermione agreed to rescue the little hydras from quarantine. "You're going tonight, right?" he asked. "No, Hagrid," she said with a smile. "These are custom inspectors, strict 9 to 5 hours." Hagrid was shocked. "But my hydras, they're just babies. They won't last another night." "Of course they will," Hermione answered, riffling through the stack of parchment he'd handed her. "These custody logs say the hydras ate 8 tins of canned tuna and 6 beef stew bones in the last 24 hours. "Not nearly enough for grown youngsters," Hagrid grumbled. If Hermione had her way, the little menaces wouldn't grow at all, but she couldn't say so, not with Lila's bright eyes watching them. Hagrid reluctantly conceded that the hydras would likely survive until Wednesday, when Hermione passes for potions and arithmetic classes. Lila badgered her all the way back to the castle about coming along, but Hermione was adamant. Trust me, this is a little dull errand, nothing interesting about it, Hermione said as they stood in the entrance hall. I won't have you missing class. Lila hung her head in disappointment, and Hermione sighed. I'll let you visit the Hydras after I return. Only you, mind. Only in my presence, and only after you give me a 6-inch scroll on the history and proper care of Hydras. I'll tell Hagrid to give you extra credit. The little girl smiled thinly. Slytherin children were kind of creepy and nodded.
Thank you, Miss Granger. You are quite useful sometimes.
Again, Hermione couldn't help grinning back. So I've been told. Dinner that night was much like the night before. Draco gave her a quick glance and seemed reassured when she nodded back. Theo ignored her completely, deigning to accept a few grapes from his admirers. Hermione again sat with her back to the Slytherin table and tried not to listen to what passed for academic discussion among Gryffindors.
I think that's a butterfly,
Seamus said, turning his teacup. He and Dean were dumping out everyone's cups and trying to read the leaves in preparation for their divination test. No, it's a grim with a book, Dean said. Oh no, mate, you're going to fail all your exams. After dinner, Hermione and Neville hiked to some remote hills outside the castle gates for some virgin earth. Her friend's silver shovel looked more ceremonial than useful, engraved with a quote from Dumbledore about Neville. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but just as much to stand up to your friend. Hermione felt bad about using the shovel to actually dig, but Neville only grinned. I'm just happy to find a use for that thing, he said. Usually I just stick it in a planter in my room. It took nearly 2 hours of tramping around hillsides to find a vein, and the two friends were mostly silent, enjoying the cold, clear night. The half-moon seemed to smile down on them, turning the whispering grasses silver. Neville didn't mention Draco, and Hermione didn't mention Pansy. They both seemed to crave a quiet night of gathering a rare magical substance for some dodgy secret purpose. They dug up enough virgin earth to fill 6 jars, which Neville stuck in a canvas bag. Keep it in a dark, cool place, Neville said, discreetly handing her one of the jars after they returned to the Gryffindor common room. Away from direct sunlight. Thank you, Neville, she said. I wish I could tell. No. Neville clutched the canvas bag to his chest, as if anything she'd say wasn't fit for his little jars of earth to hear. I don't want to know why you need magical soil, any more than I want to know why Pansy's been hanging around the owlery. Just keep me out of it. And be careful. Hermione just rolled her eyes. Everybody always acted like she was reckless or something. To be continued. Next up, Hermione takes a ride on the Hydra Express. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Gloriana Set by ThebeMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.